In the heart of Rome, sometime during the first century of the Christian era, an elliptical structure of white limestone rose above every other building in the city. The Colosseum, the largest amphitheater ever built in the ancient world, was at once a marvel of engineering and a stage for death on an industrial scale. Over nearly 400 years of operation, it is estimated that around 400,000 people lost their lives within those walls, along with nearly 1 million animals brought from the most distant corners of the empire. In this video, I use modern artificial intelligence tools to bring historical paintings, engravings, and ancient maps to life, shifting perspectives, changing camera angles, and moving through these scenes in ways their original artists could never have imagined. The goal is not merely to look at the past, but to step into it, to walk through the Colosseum as it once was, and try to feel what it meant to be there, from its construction to its final spectacle. And if you stay until the end, we will compare those same spaces with how they look today, to see what time has changed and what still remains. Before we enter the arena, it is worth understanding how this story began. Where the Colosseum stands today, there was once an artificial lake. It was part of the Domus Aurea, the extravagant palace that Emperor Nero had built for himself after the great fire that devastated Rome. When Nero fell and the Flavian dynasty came to power, Emperor Vespasian made a decision laden with symbolism. He ordered the lake drained and an amphitheater built in its place, on the very site where a monument to imperial vanity had once stood. It was a calculated gesture, a way of returning to the people a space that Nero had seized for his own use. Construction began around the year 70 and was financed with the spoils of the conquest of Jerusalem, using thousands of Jewish slaves captured during the war as labor. The work progressed over roughly a decade. Vespasian did not live to see the amphitheater completed. He died when the structure had reached the 3rd floor. His son, Titus, completed the 4th level and inaugurated the Colosseum around the year 80 with a festival of 100 days of games. Ancient accounts report that more than 9,000 wild animals were killed during that inauguration alone. Later, Titus's brother Domitian would add decisive modifications, including the hypogum, the underground network of tunnels and chambers that would forever transform how the spectacles were staged. Seen from the outside, the Colosseum was a display of power in white stone. The exterior facade had 4 floors and rose to nearly 50 meters in height, something that, at a time when most buildings had only 1 story, produced an impact comparable to standing before a modern skyscraper. Each floor featured a different architectural order, following the Greek tradition adapted by the Romans. The ground floor used columns in the Tuscan style, the 2nd floor in the Ionic style, and the 3rd in the Corinthian style, each level with a greater degree of ornamentation. 80 arches formed the perimeter of the ground floor, and between the arcades of the upper floors there were statues, most likely representing deities and figures from classical mythology. Now, let us go inside. The access system of the Colosseum operated with an efficiency that modern engineers still admire. Each spectator received a kind of ceramic ticket marked with the seat number, the floor, and the entrance gate. Of the 80 entrances, 76 were designated for the general public, 3 were reserved for nobles and council members, and 1, the North Gate, was for the emperor's exclusive use. Estimates suggest that 50,000 people could enter, find their seats, and settle in within approximately 15 minutes, a flow that rivaled that of any contemporary stadium. The seating arrangement inside the Colosseum was an accurate portrait of Roman hierarchy. All of society fit within those walls, but each person in their proper place. The lowest level, the podium, sat just 4 meters above the arena floor and was reserved for the emperor, the Vestal Virgins, the priests and the senators, whose names were carved directly into the marble of their seats. The emperor watched from a private box on the north side, reclining in a special chair. Just above sat the knights and non-senatorial nobles. Ordinary Roman citizens occupied the third level, divided between the more prosperous in the lower seats and the poorer in the upper ones. At the very top, on the steepest and most distant wooden benches, sat women, slaves, foreigners, and the poorest of Rome. Admission was free, but each person's position within those walls made clear exactly where they stood in the social order of the empire. To shield spectators from the Roman sun, which in the summer months could be relentless, there was the velarium. It was a retractable covering made of fabric, supported by more than 200 wooden masts fixed to the top of the outer wall. The system was operated by sailors from the imperial fleet, who pulled and adjusted the sails as the sun moved throughout the day. The velarium did not cover the entire opening of the amphitheatre, but it protected most of the seating tiers, while the tall walls of the Colosseum itself provided additional shade. It was an ingenious solution to a practical problem, and the mere fact that Rome mobilized sailors to operate a stadium canopy says something about the scale of resources the empire dedicated to entertainment. The floor of the arena was an elliptical surface of wood covered with a thick layer of sand. The word arena, in fact, comes directly from the Latin word for sand. This sand served a practical purpose, absorbing the bloodshed during the combats and reducing the odor under the scorching sun. But beneath that wooden and sandy floor, invisible to the spectators, lay one of the most impressive feats of engineering in all of antiquity. The Hypogeum was the underground world of the Colosseum. Built on the orders of Domitian, it consisted of 2 levels of tunnels, corridors, chambers, and cages connected by a labyrinth that extended beneath the entire area of the arena. 80 vertical shafts linked this subterranean level to the surface, allowing caged animals and pieces of scenery to be raised directly onto the arena floor. Larger platforms, called hegmata, were used to transport large animals. There were elevators operated by counterweights, pulley systems, and a considerable amount of machinery. Slaves worked in these cramped, windowless, poorly ventilated spaces by the light of oil lamps that increased the heat and intensified the smell of blood and excrement. Separate tunnels connected the Hypogeum to the Ludus Magnus, the main gladiatorial training school located to the east of the amphitheatre. And there were exclusive passageways for the emperor and the Vestal virgins, allowing them to enter and exit without mingling with the crowd. The spectacles at the Colosseum followed a structure that repeated itself on each day of games. In the morning came the animal hunts, known as venation, exotic beasts brought from the edges of the empire, lions from North Africa, bears, leopards, elephants, crocodiles, ostriches, and even giraffes were released into the arena to be hunted by men armed with spears and reinforced tunics. Sometimes the organizers transformed the arena into an artificial forest, installing trees, shrubs, and rocks to simulate the animals' natural habitat. The scenery was assembled and dismantled using the machinery of the Hypogeum, and the animals could emerge from any point on the arena floor without warning, creating surprise for both the hunters and the audience. These hunts could result in the death of thousands of animals during a single festival. During the inaugural games under Titus, accounts speak of 5,000 animals killed. Decades later, Emperor Trajan surpassed that number when celebrating his victory over the Dacians, with 123 consecutive days of games, during which 11,000 animals were slaughtered. At the midday interval, while part of the audience left for lunch, the executions took place. Condemned prisoners were brought into the arena to die in ways that varied according to the organizers' creativity. Some were left unarmed before hungry animals, a method called ad bestias. Others were forced to reenact myths and stories that ended in real deaths. These midday executions were reserved for those considered the lowest on the social scale: prisoners of war, rebellious slaves, common criminals, For Rome, the arena functioned as an instrument of public justice as much as of entertainment. In the afternoon came the gladiators, the main event that drew the greatest part of the crowd. The bouts were not disorganized clashes. Gladiators were trained professionals, assessed by size, skill, fighting style, and experience, and matched in a manner similar to what is done today in combat sports. Many were slaves or prisoners of war, but there were also free men who chose the profession, drawn by the possibility of wealth and fame. Successful gladiators were celebrities in Rome, admired by the public and desired by many women of society. They lived and trained at gladiatorial schools under the supervision of a trainer called a lanista, who rented them out for games across the empire. During training, they used only wooden weapons. The real weapons were only handed over in the hypogum, moments before they ascended to the arena, a precaution Rome had maintained since the revolt of Spartacus decades earlier. If a gladiator fell in combat, he was expected to die with dignity, without displaying fear, for bravery in the face of death was a fundamental part of the spectacle the public demanded. The Colosseum was not used every day. The games took place mainly on religious holidays, festivals, and the emperor's anniversary, perhaps a dozen times a year. But when they did occur, they lasted the entire day and sometimes extended for weeks. Everything was free for the public. The spectacles functioned as a political tool, a way for emperors to demonstrate power, generosity, and connection with the people. It was what would later be described as bread and circuses, a calculated system to keep the population entertained and satisfied while the power structure remained untouched. Near the Colosseum, where the entrance to Nero's Domus Aurea once stood, there was a colossal bronze statue. It originally represented Nero himself, but after his fall, the statue was modified and rededicated to the sun god. Emperor Hadrian later transferred it to a location near the amphitheater. This statue, known as the Colossus, is most likely the origin of the name by which the amphitheater became known. The word Colosseum appears derived from the Latin colosseus, meaning gigantic, and by around the year 1000 it was already being used to refer to the building itself. For centuries, the Colosseum withstood fires, earthquakes, and the wear of time. A great fire in the year 217, caused by a lightning strike, destroyed the upper wooden floors and required more than 30 years of reconstruction. Earthquakes in the 5th and 14th centuries caused parts of the outer wall to collapse, especially on the south side. But perhaps the greatest damage came from human hands. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the Colosseum was used as a quarry. Its travertine stones, its marble, and even the iron clamps that held the blocks together were systematically removed to be used in other constructions, including the Basilica of St. Peter. The holes visible today in the walls of the Colosseum are the marks left by the extraction of those clamps. Gladiatorial combat was banned in the early 5th century, and the animal hunts continued until at least the year 523. After that, the amphitheater fell out of use as a venue for entertainment. Over the following centuries, it was occupied by residents, craftsmen's workshops, and was even used as a fortress by noble Roman families. Vegetation overtook the ruins. In the 18th century, Pope Benedict XIV declared the site sacred, believing that Christians had been martyred there, although there is no firm historical evidence that Christians were actually executed inside the Colosseum. Now I want to bring you to the present and show how these spaces appear today. Thank you for being here, and if you have suggestions or requests for future cities, leave them in the comments. Let us go. The exterior facade that once gleamed in white travertine under the Roman sun today shows only part of its original structure. The north side of the perimeter wall still stands at its full height, but the rest of what we see from the outside is in fact the original inner wall, Wedge-shaped brick reinforcements were added in the early 19th century to stabilize what remained. The arena floor disappeared centuries ago, and the hypogeum, which throughout antiquity lay hidden beneath the wooden and sandy surface, is today fully exposed and visible. Visitors can look down from above and see the network of corridors and chambers where gladiators and animals waited before the spectacles. A wooden walkway crosses part of the arena, offering a perspective no Roman spectator ever had. The marble seats have almost entirely disappeared, removed over the centuries to be reused in other buildings. But the concrete structure that supported them is still there, and it is possible to see the lines and curves that defined each sector and each row. The names of 5th-century senators can still be found carved in the stone, marking the places once reserved for the most powerful men of Rome. The Italian government has announced an ambitious project to reconstruct the arena floor with a sustainable, retractable wooden surface, which will allow visitors to walk through the center of the amphitheater and experience the same perspective the gladiators had before entering combat, while movable panels will be able to open to reveal the hypogeum below. Today, the Colosseum receives around 7 million visitors per year. It is listed as one of the new 7 wonders of the world and appears on the Italian version of the 5-cent euro coin. Where once blood soaked the sand and the roar of lions mingled with the clamor of 50,000 spectators, there are now lines of tourists with cameras, guides with microphones, and the distant sound of Roman traffic. The scale remains impressive. The walls still rise, the arches still curve, and even in ruins, the building communicates exactly what it communicated nearly 2,000 years ago. The size and ambition of an empire that knew no limits, neither in construction nor in destruction. I truly thank you for watching. Your ideas, suggestions, and constructive comments genuinely shape what comes next. Feel free to leave a comment below. Until next time.